The girl in the ashes. The ground was black. Trees stood like broken bones in the sky. Nothing moved, not even the wind. Captain Jack Rayner stepped out of the dropship, his boots crunching over ash. "What happened here?" one soldier asked, voice low. "Same as the last village," Jack replied. "Burned. No survivors reported. They were on planet Velfar, a once green world now dying." Jack's team was part of a rescue mission. They had seen 5 destroyed settlements already. This one felt different. Quieter. Heavier. They moved through the ruins. Burned homes. Cracked glass. Clothes hanging on wires, untouched by fire, but covered in gray dust. Then Jack saw her. A small shape curled between 2 blackened trees. He raised his hand, stopping the team. "Wait, someone's there." He approached slowly, his weapon ready. But as he got closer, his steps slowed. It was a girl. Alien, but not like others he had seen. Her skin was pale purple, soft like silk. She looked young, maybe 17 in human years. Her white dress was dirty and torn. Ash clung to her hair. Her eyes opened. They glowed a soft blue, not with power, but pain. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. "Don't leave me." Jack knelt beside her. "You're safe now." "Who did this?" She looked around, confused. "Everyone's gone." The sky screamed. Then they all fell. "What's your name?" "Hilary," she said. Jack gave her water and called for med support, but the medic frowned. "She has no wounds, just tired and cold." "But sir," he hesitated. "Her veins. They move. Look." Jack looked. For a second, he saw something under her skin, like small black lines crawling. Then it was gone. "Probably just trauma," he said, brushing it off. But a chill ran down his spine. They brought Hilary back to camp. She didn't speak much, just sat by the fire, staring into the flames. Jack stayed close. There was something about her. She seemed scared, but not of them. Of something else. Something still out there. That night, as others slept, Jack heard movement. He got up quietly and followed the sound. Hilary was walking toward the forest, barefoot. "Hilary," he called softly. She turned slowly. Her eyes were wide, but not blue anymore. They were black. Deep, endless black. "Stay," she whispered. "Stay with me." Then she collapsed. Jack ran to her and held her. Her eyes turned blue again, like nothing had happened. I'm sorry," she said. "I was sleepwalking." Jack nodded, but his hands were shaking. He told no one. In the morning, a soldier named Kirk approached him. "Sir, I don't trust her. She's just a kid. She's not human. And last night, I saw her mouth move, like she was talking, but no sound came out." Jack ignored him, but doubts had started to grow. Later that day, Hilary helped carry supplies. She smiled for the first time. Jack felt a warmth inside. Maybe she really was just a survivor. Maybe she just needed kindness. But that night, he woke to whispers. Not from outside. From inside his head. He sat up, heart racing. Hilary was sleeping across the fire, her body twitching, her lips moving. He leaned closer. She whispered, "Jack, help me, please." Then her voice changed. It became low. Not hers. Not even human. "He's perfect," it said. "He will do nicely." Jack jumped back, eyes wide. But Hilary was asleep, or pretending to be. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, Jack found black marks on her neck. Tiny veins, moving. He took a deep breath. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Something's living inside her. Jack Rayner didn't tell the others what he saw. Not yet. They were already on edge. 5 burned villages. No enemies. No survivors, except Hilary. She was the only one. And now something inside her was moving. Jack kept a close eye on her. He wanted to believe she was just sick, tired, traumatized. But when he looked into her eyes now, sometimes they didn't feel like her eyes at all. That morning, the squad packed up and prepared to move toward base camp. It was a 6-hour hike through the forest. Ilari walked beside Jack, holding a small canteen. She was quiet, like always. But when she smiled at him, it felt real. Soft, innocent. "Thank you for helping me," she said. "You're welcome," Jack replied. "We're here to help." "Most people don't help," she whispered. "Most people run." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Run from what?" She looked up. Her blue eyes shimmered in the sunlight. "From what's hiding in me." Jack stopped walking. "What do you mean?" But Ilari shook her head. "Nothing. I'm just tired." Jack felt his chest tighten. That was the first time she said something like that. Direct. Clear, like she remembered. A few hours later, they set up temporary camp beside a stream. Clean water, quiet air, birds chirped in the distance, one of the few peaceful places left on Velfar. Jack sat by the water, watching Ilari from afar. She knelt nearby, washing her hands, humming a song, something soft and haunting. Lieutenant Brenner approached Jack. "Sir," he said, "we should talk." Jack nodded. "Go on." Two more soldiers said they've been hearing things at night. Whispers, voices, and something else. One of them had a nosebleed this morning. Thick black blood. Jack looked at him sharply. "Black." Brenner nodded, "just like the marks on that girl's neck." Jack didn't answer. He looked at Ilari, her hands in the stream. Her fingers were twitching. Not like normal fingers, like tiny snakes under her skin. That night, Ilari was asleep near the fire. Jack sat beside her, pretending to check equipment. But really, he was watching. She stirred. Her breathing changed. Then, her body went still. Too still. Jack leaned in. Her eyes opened slowly. But they weren't blue. They were completely black again, like bottomless holes. "Jack," she whispered, "can you hear me?" He froze. "Jack, it's me. I'm inside. I can't move. It's controlling me." Jack's throat went dry. "Who's controlling you?" Her mouth twitched. Her lips stretched into a cold, stiff smile. "We are," the voice said. Deeper, colder. Not hers. "You don't understand what she is. What she's hiding. She's the door." Jack backed away. Ilari's eyes blinked, and suddenly they were blue again. She gasped and grabbed his arm. "Please," she said, tears in her eyes. "I don't know what's happening to me." Jack held her tightly. "You need help." "I'm scared," she whispered. "I am too," Jack said. The next morning, Private Kent went missing. His bedroll was empty. No footprints, no signs of struggle. Only blood. And something strange near the edge of the trees. A trail of black slime. Brenner sounded the alarm. Soldiers grabbed weapons. "We're under attack," someone yelled. But Jack knew it wasn't an outside attack. It came from within. He ran to find Ilari. She was sitting on a rock, staring at the sun. Her dress had a long tear down the side, where black veins could be seen under her skin. More of them now. Longer. Thicker. "Ilari," he said, "where were you last night?" She turned slowly. "I don't know," she said. "I woke up here. Alone." "Did you see Kent?" Her face stayed calm. Too calm. "No," she said. "But I smelled something. Something sweet." Jack didn't like that answer. Later, in private, Jack pulled up her sleeve. "I need to see something," he said. She didn't stop him. Black lines, moving slowly like worms beneath the skin. He touched them, and Ilari screamed. Not just in pain. In fear, her whole body shook. "Don't touch them," she said. "They don't like that." "What are they?" They talk to me in dreams, she said, her voice trembling. They call themselves the Forgotten. They said they lived here long before my people. They were buried deep. Something woke them. And now they want hosts. Jack's hands clenched. You're not one of them, Ilari. No, she said, but I'm not fully me either. That night, Jack set up a secret camera near Ilari's bedroll. He needed proof. He needed to know what was happening when she slept. Hours passed. Just before midnight, he saw it. Ilari sat up slowly, eyes wide open but lifeless. She crawled toward the fire. Then, toward Soldier Thomas. She leaned down and whispered something into his ear. Thomas gasped, but stayed asleep. Black lines crawled out from her fingers and touched his skin. They slid inside. The camera froze. Jack's heart stopped. Stay with me, or die. Jack Rayner watched the screen over and over again. The video didn't lie. Ilari had crawled over to Thomas like a puppet with strings. Her hands had touched his face gently, lovingly, and then black lines slipped out of her fingers and entered his skin. Thomas never woke up. Jack closed the recording. He sat in the cold, dark corner of the camp, breathing hard. His heart was pounding. He didn't want to believe it. But the truth was staring at him. She was spreading it, whatever it was. The next morning, Thomas didn't feel well. He looked pale, sweating even though the air was cold. Jack examined him. His eyes were bloodshot, and a small black mark had formed just below his left ear. Must be a bug bite, Thomas said, rubbing it. But Jack had seen that shape before. Ilari's veins looked the same. Jack didn't say anything. Not yet. He needed more time. Ilari sat alone by the stream again, humming her strange song. Jack walked toward her. Good morning, he said carefully. It's a beautiful day, she replied, not looking at him. You sleep okay? She nodded. I had a dream. You were in it. Jack's stomach turned. What kind of dream? Ilari tilted her head slowly. You were smiling. You said you'd stay with me forever. Jack forced a smile. Sounds like a nice dream. But then, she added, someone tried to take you away. So, I killed them. Jack stopped smiling. Ilari blinked. It was just a dream, she said. But was it? Later that day, another soldier collapsed. This time, it was Private Dean. He screamed in his sleep. His body shook violently. When they woke him, he cried like a child. They're inside me, he said, clawing at his chest. They're crawling up my spine. They held him down and gave him a sedative. Jack checked his neck. Black veins again. Brenner looked at Jack. What the hell is going on? Jack hesitated. Then he told him about the video. Brenner was shocked. You're telling me she's doing this? Jack nodded. At night. She's not even awake when it happens, or maybe part of her is. Brenner looked angry. We should put her down. Now. Jack stepped between him and the others. No. I need more time. Why? Brenner asked. Because you care about her. Jack didn't answer. Because the truth was, yes. He cared. Too much. That night, Jack kept watch alone near Ilari's tent. He didn't sleep, just waited. At 3:12 a.m., she moved again. Jack stood, silent. Ilari stepped out of her tent in slow, smooth steps. Her eyes were wide open, glowing slightly in the moonlight. But this time, she walked straight toward Jack. His hand moved to his weapon, but he couldn't pull it out. His body froze, completely. His fingers didn't respond. His breathing slowed. Ilari stood in front of him, just inches away. You promised, she whispered. You said you'd stay. Ilari, Jack said, struggling to speak. Don't do this. It's not me, she replied. They like you. They think you're special, strong. They want to make you one of us. Jack tried to back away, but his legs didn't move. She raised her hand. slowly touching his chest. "Don't be afraid," she said softly. "You'll never be alone again." Then she leaned in and kissed him. A sharp light burst. Someone tackled Ilari from the side. "Brenner, get her off him," he yelled. Jack fell to the ground, breathing again, coughing. Ilari screamed, not like a girl, but like something else. Her voice echoed with layers, like 3 voices in one. Soldiers dragged her back and locked her in a metal cage. She thrashed violently, eyes turning pitch black, teeth sharp, unnatural. Jack watched her from behind the bars. After a few minutes, her body calmed. Her eyes turned blue again. She looked at Jack. "Why did you stop me?" she whispered. Jack said nothing. She looked down at her hands. "I don't remember what happened," she said. "But I know. It was bad." Jack finally spoke. "Ilari, how long has this been happening?" She hugged her knees. "Since the black mist. It came into my village." Everyone screamed. I heard voices. Then everything went quiet. "And you?" "I survived. I thought I was lucky. But I wasn't." "Why me?" he asked. Ilari looked up, eyes shining with tears. "Because they want someone strong. Someone they can't break. They thought it would be fun to watch me try. To see if love would help me take you." Jack stepped back, shaken. Later, that night, Brenner made his plan. "We kill her," he said, "before it spreads to everyone." Jack refused. "She's still in there." "No, she's not." But Jack had already decided. He had to find answers, and to do that, he had to go where it all started. The next day, Jack left camp alone with Ilari. He told the others he was taking her to a hidden med center deep in the jungle ruins. Brenner warned him, "You bring her back, and she kills us all. Don't forget what she is." Jack didn't answer, because he knew the truth. Ilari wasn't the only one infected now. That night, Jack looked at his arm. A black line had started to appear on his wrist. "The parasite knows your name." Jack Rayner had always believed he was a soldier, nothing more. But now, something inside him was changing. Not just his thoughts, not just his dreams, his body. The black line on his wrist had grown longer overnight. It pulsed slowly beneath his skin, like it was breathing, like it was alive. He covered it with a cloth and didn't tell anyone, not even Ilari. They were deep in the jungle now, far from the rest of the squad. It was dangerous to go alone, but Jack had made up his mind. Ilari had told him once about the ruins, ancient places built by her people long before the war, a temple hidden under the trees, a place where the voices started. They needed answers. They needed a cure. Ilari walked beside him, quiet. She looked tired, pale. Her skin was cold to the touch. "How do you feel?" Jack asked gently. "Empty," she whispered, "like something's missing, and something else is growing inside." He looked away. He knew that feeling now too. They walked for hours, cutting through thick vines and stepping over moss-covered stones. The air smelled old, like wet stone and rotting leaves. Finally, they'd found it. A giant doorway built into the cliffside, cracked and half-buried, covered in vines. Strange glowing symbols ran along the top like writing, but in no language Jack had ever seen. Ilari's fingers trembled as she touched the stone. "This is where it began," she said. "They called it the cradle, the first place the parasite ever spoke." Inside, the temple was cold and dark. Walls were covered in carvings, alien faces, open mouths, long black tendrils rising from the ground and entering the skies. It looked like a story, a warning. Jack lit a torch. The flame flickered as if afraid. "What happened here?" he asked. Ilari pointed to one of the walls. It showed a figure kneeling, hands raised. Something black entered through the mouth. "They made a deal," she said, "long ago. The old kings of my planet. They wanted power, so they opened a door. but they couldn't control what came through. Jack stared. The parasite. Ilari nodded. It's not just one. It's a network, a living memory. It spreads like thought, like love, like hate. How do we stop it? She didn't answer. Suddenly, Jack stumbled. His head spun. His ears rang. He dropped the torch and fell to his knees. Jack. Ilari rushed to him. His vision blurred. And then, he heard it. A voice. Inside his mind. Not Ilari's. Not his own. Something darker. Something curious. So much pain. So much fire in you. You will make a beautiful host. Jack screamed, grabbing his head. Get out of my mind. Ilari held him tightly. Fight it. Don't let it take control. Jack gasped for air. Slowly, the voice faded. But something was different now. He looked at Ilari. It knows my name. What? The parasite. It called me by name. Ilari's face went pale. Then it's already inside. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Brenner stared at the forest edge. Something was wrong. 3 soldiers had collapsed. More black veins. No one had left. No one had touched Ilari. It's spreading without contact now, Brenner whispered. One of the 6 soldiers laughed suddenly. A low, echoing laugh. You can't run, he said. You can't hide. We are memory. We are many. Brenner raised his gun. What are you? The soldier smiled with blackened teeth. We are already inside your story. Back in the ruins, Ilari found a glowing crystal near the center of the temple. It pulsed with light. This is it, she said. This is the source. The seed. Can it be destroyed? Jack asked. Yes, but if we destroy it, the parasite will panic. It might kill every host. Jack frowned. What if we used it instead? Ilari looked at him sharply. What do you mean? We don't destroy it. We trap the parasite inside it again. Seal it. But someone has to take the infection, all of it, and become the key. Her voice trembled. You mean a sacrifice? Jack nodded. Ilari looked at him. You want to do it, don't you? I'm already infected, he said quietly. Maybe I can pull it into me. Then you can seal it. No, Ilari said firmly. You can't. Why not? Tears fell from her eyes. Because I love you. Jack froze. He hadn't expected that. She touched his face. Don't become one of them. I'd rather die with you than live without you. He held her hand. We'll find another way. But deep inside, he knew. There might not be one. Later that night, while Jack slept, Ilari stood alone before the crystal. The voices inside her screamed louder than ever. Give us the boy, they hissed. He is stronger. He is fire. We will burn galaxies with him. She clutched her head. No, she whispered. Then give us yourself. I already did, she said, when you took my family, my people. Then take the boy's heart. Ilari's hands trembled. She knew what they wanted. They didn't just want a body. They wanted love, because love made the infection stronger. And Jack had started to love her too. The next morning, Jack woke up alone. Ilari was gone. All she left behind was a message scratched into stone. Stay away, or stay forever. The choice is yours. Jack clenched his fists. He looked at his wrist. The black line now reached his elbow. The infection spreads. Jack Rayner ran through the jungle like a man chasing a dream he couldn't let die. Ilari was gone. She had left before sunrise, vanishing without a sound, leaving behind only her words scratched into the stone. Stay away, or stay forever. The choice is yours. Those words haunted him. His chest burned, his wrist itched, and now the black veins had reached his shoulder. The infection was winning. And so was the fear. He followed her trail for hours. Broken vines, faint footprints, and the smell of ash. Those were his clues. By sunset, Jack found himself standing at the edge of a wide clearing. In the center stood a tree, twisted, massive, and black. It didn't belong there. Nothing grew around it. No birds sang. Even the wind seemed afraid to touch it. And under that tree stood Ilari. She was barefoot, her white dress soaked in sweat and dirt. Her skin was almost gray now, her blue eyes dull. But she was still Ilari, or part of her was. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly as he stepped closer. "You left me," Jack replied, "to save you. Then why does it hurt more being without you?" She looked away. "Because they made sure it would." Jack walked closer, despite the pull in his chest, the dizziness in his head. The infection inside him wanted to stop him, but his heart pushed harder. "Tell me what this is," he said, pointing to the black tree. "The heart," she answered. "The parasite's source. It feeds from memory, pain, love. It grows stronger when we suffer. That's why it won't let us forget." Jack stared at the tree. Its bark moved, pulsed. And the roots, they weren't roots. They were bones. Twisted bodies merged with the earth. "Can we destroy it?" he asked. Ilari shook her head. "Not without dying. It's tied to us now. To you, to me, to everyone we ever touched." Jack lowered his eyes. "Then we find another way." Ilari stepped forward. "There is a way, but you won't like it. Tell me anyway." "We have to pull the infection out of all hosts into one body, then use the crystal to trap it forever." Jack nodded. "Me. I'll do it." Ilari's face broke. "No, me." Jack moved closer. "I'm already infected. Worse than you." "But you still have a future," she said. "I lost mine when my people died." "Don't talk like that," he snapped. "You're still here. You're still fighting." "No," she said quietly. "I'm only here because they want me to be. I'm the bait. You're the prize." Jack clenched his fists. Then, from deep within the tree, a rumble echoed. The parasite was listening. Suddenly, pain struck Jack's chest. He fell to his knees, gasping. The infection surged like fire through his veins. He saw visions, soldiers screaming, planets burning, Ilari crying. Then a voice filled his head. "Give in. Let us make you perfect." "No," he shouted, holding his head. He felt his body rise. Not by choice. His arms moved, lifting without control. His mouth smiled, but it wasn't him. Ilari ran to him. "Fight it. Jack, listen to me." Jack's lips moved again. The voice spoke through him. "She wants to die. We can give her peace. Say goodbye, Jack." Jack screamed and broke free, collapsing in the dirt. Ilari held him. They were both crying now, far away in the human camp. Brenner watched in horror as 3 more soldiers dropped. The parasite had reached the base. One of the infected soldiers began whispering in a strange voice. "Jack is the key. We are waiting. Come watch him fall." Brenner grabbed his rifle. "I'm going after him." "You'll die," someone said. "Then I'll die fighting." Back in the jungle, Jack stood weakly beside Ilari. They didn't speak much now. They just held hands. The black tree pulsed louder. Its roots twisted. The forest trembled. "We don't have time," Jack said. Ilari nodded. She pulled out the crystal. It glowed again, just like before. "Whoever takes the infection," she said, "has to hold the crystal tight. It'll draw everything in. It'll burn. It'll feel like dying." Jack reached for it. But Ilari moved faster. She pressed it to her chest. Jack yelled, "No." A blast of blue light exploded from the crystal. The ground cracked. The air screamed. Black mist shot from Jack's body, torn out like smoke. And from the trees, more darkness poured out. Into Ilari. She screamed, falling to her knees. Her skin flashed between normal and black. Her veins glowed. Her eyes turned red. The parasite was fighting back. Jack grabbed her. "Hold on," he shouted. "You're stronger than them." She looked up, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay with me, or die." Then everything went silent. When Jack opened his eyes, Hilary was on the ground, shaking. The crystal had gone dim. The black tree was withering, its bark cracking and crumbling. The infection was gone, but so was Hilary's glow. Her skin had faded to pale gray. Her breathing was slow. Jack held her in his arms. "Hilary, you did it." She smiled weakly. "I didn't want you to die. Not for me. I would have," Jack whispered. "I know," she said, eyes closing. "But now you'll live. For both of us." Her eyes shut. Jack held her tight, his tears falling onto her still hands. But then, her fingers twitched, and a black line started forming again on her neck. Jack's heart dropped. It wasn't over. She's not the same anymore. The jungle was silent. Too silent. Jack Rayner held Hilary's body close, her skin cold, her breathing almost gone. She had taken the infection into herself. She had saved him. She had saved everyone. But now, she was changing. Again. The black veins had returned. Slowly, they crept across her neck, her arms, her face. The crystal lay beside her, dim, cracked, broken. Jack's heart felt like it was being torn in half. "Hilary," he whispered, brushing the hair from her eyes. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open. But they weren't blue anymore. They were silver. Glowing, but empty. She sat up slowly. Her movement was stiff, like a machine learning to move. Jack backed away slightly. "Hilary," he asked. She turned her head toward him, tilted it, like she was studying a stranger. "Jack Rayner," she said in a cold, robotic tone. Human, warrior, bonded to host memory. His blood ran cold. "Hilary?" he repeated, voice trembling. She blinked once. Then her voice changed. Warmer, softer. "Jack, it's me." He stepped closer. But just as he did, her eyes flickered again, and her mouth smiled, cruel and unfamiliar. "No," the cold voice said. "She's still in here, but not in control." Jack clenched his fists. "Give her back." The voice laughed through her lips. "There is no back. There is only forward now." He didn't want to believe it. But the truth was clear. Hilary was no longer just Hilary. She had become something more, or something less. That night, they sat by a dying fire. Jack didn't sleep. He couldn't. Hilary, or what was left of her, sat across from him, staring at the flames. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she cried. Sometimes she spoke to no one, whispering in a language Jack didn't know. But once, she looked straight at him and whispered, "I miss you." Jack stared at her. "I'm right here." "No," she said, voice shaking. "You don't see me anymore. You only see it." "Then help me see you again," he said. "Fight it. Don't let it take you." "I try," she whispered. "But every time I speak, it listens. Every time I remember you, it grows stronger." Jack reached out, touched her hand. She didn't pull away. But her fingers were ice. "If I go deeper," she said, "you won't be able to bring me back." "Then I'll follow you," Jack replied. "As deep as it takes." At dawn, they reached the edge of a ruined village, Hilary's home, or what was left of it. Black ash, bones, shadows. Her steps slowed. "This is where it started," she said, "where they first touched me." Jack looked around. The houses were nothing but walls now, burned, hollow. And near the center of the village stood a strange stone pillar, smooth, tall, glowing faintly. Jack walked toward it. Symbols were carved into its sides. His fingers brushed them. Suddenly, visions exploded in his head. Not his memories, Hilary's. He saw her playing as a child, laughing, hiding, dreaming, then screaming. The black mist, the first voices. Her mother pulled away from her, eyes wide in fear. And then, darkness. Jack fell to his knees. Hilary stood behind him. "Now you know," she said softly, "why I couldn't stop it." "You were just a child," he whispered. "And they used my fear," she replied. "Fear makes us easy to control. Love makes us impossible to forget." Then, a sound. Footsteps. Jack turned sharply. Brenner. Gun raised. "Step away from her," Brenner ordered. "Now." "Don't," Jack said. "She's still in there. She's gone. Look at her. That's not Hilary anymore." Hilary didn't move. "I'm still here," she said softly. Brenner looked between them. "She's dangerous. The infection is active again. If we don't end this now." "She saved me," Jack shouted. "She saved all of us." "And now she's going to kill us," Brenner growled. "You think she's special to it? No, it's just playing with you. That's what parasites do." He aimed at her head. Jack stood in front of her. "Shoot me first." Brenner's finger tightened on the trigger. Then Hilary raised her hand, not in defense, in peace, and spoke, in the parasite's voice. "We could kill him. We could kill all of them. But we don't want to. We want to understand why he loves her so much." Her eyes locked with Jack's. "Tell us." Jack swallowed hard and said the one truth that had been growing inside him since the day they met. "Because when I look at her, I see myself." The forest went still. Hilary blinked, and her eyes turned blue again, but only for a moment. Then she collapsed. Her body shook violently. The ground around her cracked. The infection was reacting, rejecting the emotion, rejecting love. "Jack," she gasped, "it's breaking. I can't hold it." "You can." "No, I can't." "Then let me help." Jack knelt beside her. "If we link, if you open your mind to me, I'll carry part of it. We'll split it. Together." "No," she cried. "You'll die." "Maybe, but I'd rather die with you than live watching you fade." She hesitated, then nodded. Their hands touched, and the world changed. In the next moment, they were no longer in the jungle. They were standing in a dream, a space filled with stars, water, fire, memory. Jack and Hilary, side by side. And the parasite, a dark shape of many voices, stood before them. "You think love will stop us?" it asked. "No," Jack replied. "I think love is what you fear most. One last goodbye." It was not a real place, not a jungle, not a planet, just a space filled with stars, fire, memories, and voices that didn't belong. Jack Rayner stood beside Hilary. They were no longer touching the ground. There was no ground, just floating memories. And in front of them, a creature made of shadows, shifting and whispering in many voices. This was the parasite's true form. A living storm of pain, regret, hunger, and forgotten names. "You came willingly," it said in 100 voices at once. "How beautiful, how stupid." Jack held Hilary's hand tightly. "We came together," he said. The parasite hissed. "You think that matters. Love is weakness. Love creates pain. Pain feeds us." Hilary's voice was steady. "But love also creates hope, and hope doesn't feed you, does it?" The shadows twitched. It hated that word. The creature moved closer. Tentacles of thought and memory reached toward them. "Give up," it said. "We already live inside you. You can't win." Jack took a deep breath and stepped forward. "You're right. We can't fight you with weapons." He looked back at Hilary. "But we can fight you with truth." Then he did something the parasite didn't expect. He opened his mind. He let the creature see everything. His childhood, his fear, his war, his loneliness. His first smile from Ilari. His first heartbeat that changed when she whispered his name. "See it," he said. "Feel it." The parasite screamed. It wasn't a normal scream. It shattered stars, because it had no shield against love. Love didn't hurt like pain. It didn't break like fear. It burned like light. It was something the parasite had never needed, and never understood. "Stop," it roared. "We don't want this." "You already took it," Ilari said, stepping forward. "When you entered me, when you made me love and hate myself at the same time. We only took what was broken," it hissed. "And we're here to put it back together," she whispered. Jack turned to Ilari. "We only have one chance." "I know," she said. "If we push it into the crystal, together, we might trap it for good. But it will fight. Then we fight harder." Ilari smiled, not because she wasn't afraid, but because she was ready. They held hands. They lifted the crystal between them. It glowed again, brighter than ever before. The parasite screamed louder, rising like a wave, ready to crash down. But this time, Jack and Ilari stood firm. "This is not your story," Jack said. "This is ours," Ilari added. They thrust the crystal forward, and it absorbed everything. The parasite's tendrils, voices, faces, claws, all got pulled inside like dust into a sun. The creature thrashed and howled, but it couldn't stop them. And then, silence. When Jack opened his eyes, he was back in the jungle. He was lying on the ground, breathing hard. Birds were singing. Sunlight filtered through the trees. He touched his wrist. No black lines. He sat up, looked around, and saw her, Ilari, lying still. He rushed to her. Her face was peaceful. Too peaceful. "Ilari?" he whispered. No answer. He shook her gently. Still nothing. Her chest was no longer rising. She had given everything. Jack cried like a child. No war, no battle, no training could prepare him for this kind of pain. The kind of pain that didn't bleed from wounds, but from memories. He buried her at the roots of a tree. A new one. Green. Alive. Growing. He carved her name into a stone. Ilari, the girl who saved the stars. Days later, Jack returned to base. The infection was gone. Brenner nodded at him, quiet and respectful. "You saved us," he said. "She saved us," Jack replied. Was she, herself? At the end, Jack smiled sadly. She was more than herself. Weeks passed. Jack found himself walking in the ruins again. Sometimes he heard her voice in the wind. Sometimes he saw her smile in the stars. And one night, as he sat beside the fire, he whispered, "I'm still here." And a soft voice answered in the wind, "I know."